Behind Bob Iger's back, a Disney classic has been secretly restored by a fan, and it's in higher quality than Walt could have ever imagined. Come join us for the discussion on That Park Place. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to That Park Place, where we like to go through all the news that should be fun. On Saturday right now, we like to do some discussion videos, and on a members exclusive stream on the WDW Pro channel, I highly recommend you go check that out and become a member. Joshua Harris, WDW Pro, and myself got into a discussion about Song of the South and a newly released restoration of the film that was not done by the Walt Disney Company. So if you can imagine how much it takes to get one of these films restored, and then it was done by a freelancer, someone who has no connection to the Walt Disney Company, or we hope maybe they do. Maybe it's a secret plot to get this film restored. Actually, there's more on that in part 2, because we are going to release this in 2 parts. But enough of that. Let's get into the discussion of this excellent restoration, and maybe it can help you find it for yourself if you are so inclined.
All right, so you sent this our way, Josh. That's right. You sent this our way. Song of the South being restored. Let me show folks what we're talking about here. But real quick, as we're getting ready to show this, Josh, tell the folks out there, why does the Walt Disney Company not appreciate Song of the South no more?
Oh my! You always ask the hardest questions first. That's interesting. First, the first reason why is that shortly after its last release in the U.S., which I believe was in 1986, shortly after that, and after they already greenlit Splash Mountain, the NAACP took a look at the film, and then they decided that it wasn't to their aesthetic pleasing. And it also didn't fit their narrative that anything of any importance so far as racial harmony occurred until the 1960s civil rights movement. Everything that happens before the civil rights movement doesn't actually exist, except for it was always portrayed in a negative light. And Song of the South goes against that narrative. That's basically the reason why it's been shelved for all this time, because the NAACP does not approve of the film. And it did that with Eisner, and it definitely affects Iger, because Iger believes that most passionately. So that's the reason why that it won't do that from a technical perspective. From a more cultural, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say, Josh, and you're going to hear a delay here, so it's a slight pause for you. But what I was going to say is that the last theatrical release, my understanding is for Song of the South, was in the late 80s, and that it did exceedingly well in its theatrical release, which is what actually gave Imagineering the confidence to go ahead with a Splash Mountain that was conceptualized around that property.
Correct. Yeah, it was. And that's where some of the history gets very, very confusing. There's been multiple, there have been books written about this controversy before. There's also been several different articles. There was an entire podcast devoted to it, and it was probably around I think it was 8 or 10 hours long. That was around that, but it was being done by someone who is very much one-sided in their political views, and that just spewed out just listening to it, because I listened to the first hour or so, but it was so the language was so charged I couldn't stand to listen to it after a very short time. But then there was the NAACP part about it, and then it continued on from there, and they've been shelving it ever since. The cultural reason why, I believe, after much more time than I ever wanted to spend on this subject, learning about it, is basically the problem with Splash Mountain is not the presence of racism. The problem is the absence of racism. Because because the show really just has an amazing way of depicting itself, to where everyone's not necessarily looked at as no one is looked down upon. Even though Uncle Remus is causing a little bit of family trouble during the entire film. He's really looked at as a wisdom speaker for the entire community. And one of the most interesting things about this film, and I haven't seen this covered by most people, is that most people think that it's rather controversial that Walt Disney has an FBI file. First of all, everybody had an FBI file at that time if you were remotely public about it. But the reason why
we may be back we may be back in that situation now, Josh. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because Hoover kept files on everybody. But the reason why Walt Disney's file was opened was because the board of directors of the Walt Disney Productions, which was his name at the time, were very incensed by the enormously reverential and respectful treatment that the James Baskett / Uncle Remus was receiving during this film. And the board of directors was very much aghast at this. So they decided to call Hoover to go ahead and essentially rat out Walt Disney and try to get an FBI file on him to have some sort of intimidation tactic to make sure that this film either wasn't produced or wasn't successful.
Right,
so
because Walt's vision originally was to try to bring healing between the races with this film. And, he didn't have every single means at his disposal. At the time, he was simply a family and more specifically children's entertainment production studio. That's it. And so it's not as if he could create some sort of rough and rugged documentary about slavery, but what he could do is he could bring forth the mythology of Africa, the legitimate folklore of the slaves, which were the bre'r animals, the bre'r critters, and he tried to do that in a way that would present black children and white children together in a harmonious sort of thing, not like Epcot, folks, we know, but in a harmonious sort of way. And he's been derided for that, of course, but it was as you said, controversial enough at the time for the opposite reason that it's controversial today, that the powers that be were unhappy with him for doing so. And it even went so far that at the premiere in Atlanta, where Walt was present, that he refused to go into the theater for the showing of the movie because James Baskett himself was not allowed. And so Walt took a stand there. This, of course, all part of the interview we did with Valerie Stewart, daughter of Nick Stewart, who was the voice actor for bre'r. Unfortunately, Valerie passed away shortly after the interview we did. Folks, go find it. We'll have a best of at the end of the year, and it will definitely be at the top. But Valerie Stewart, of course, told us so much about how this movie was made and the people who participated in it. And she really just, in one of her, or perhaps even her final interview, she really destroyed the narratives that are against the movie. Now, Josh,
if anybody hasn't seen it, that interview is still on the channel, and it is probably, I hate to say that you peaked early, Pro, but it is one of the best things that you've done on this YouTube channel.
Well, when you are interviewing a lady and she talks to you about how Ella Fitzgerald was her babysitter, you are in the presence of Hollywood royalty. And then to hear how that Hollywood royalty was stripped from her and her family and their legacy because they were on the wrong side of history starting in the 90s once Iger took power. Very, very sad. But I do want to take a look at this effort that they are making with Song of the South, restoration. And let's just read this a wee bit. Digital Janitor is the author of this one. And publication date, this is very recent. It only came out in late September. And it says, as you have probably noticed, all the other versions of Song of the South here on the Internet Archive are junk. That needed to change. For more than 6 months, I have spent hundreds of hours restoring a well-worn print of Walt Disney's Song of the South to be as close to the filmmaker's intent as possible. Even though I had no access to the original negatives or other studio elements, I became aware of some generally circulating but imperfect assets that appeared to offer enough information to possibly eke out a presentable version of the film. So I engaged in an intense restoration project, largely because I wanted to finally see and enjoy one of my favorite films as it was intended. And I am excited to announce that the result of the effort is a version of Song of the South that is more pristine than any version even Walt himself ever witnessed. And I have watched this now, Josh. I appreciate you sending it to me. And indeed, this does absolutely rise to the level and perhaps even surpasses what Disney does with their restorations. Folks, you can find it. You're just going to need to go to archive.org, and I will put it in the public chat, so all of you out there can go to this if you so choose. So there it is for all of you out there. And mods, if you wouldn't mind to show that. And by the way, thank you, mods, being here on a live stream that's member exclusive. So kind of you. But yeah, everybody, make sure you go check this out. You can finally judge for yourself in the pristine and perhaps even better than original condition Song of the South. Go out there and judge for yourself. Listen not to the boo birds or to the those who wish to praise it with showers of accolades, but rather just go view it yourself. Demystify the tale and see, was Walt an evil, terrible person, or was this an endeavor to bring good into the world? You be the judge. Josh, final thoughts on the Song of the South and the restoration. You, I assume, have seen the restoration. What's your take on the quality?
The quality is amazing with the way that he or she was able to do this. I mean, it was really impressive. I've done some minor film restorations myself for various projects. They are very, very time consuming. It is very, very meticulous work, and it is extraordinarily hard. And I'm glad that I did not have to do this one. So it's just really impressive the way that they were able to do it. And I think that one of the really important things about it is not just that you're experiencing it from a much more beautiful state than it has been previously, but when you're looking at an old print of something, or something that has been severely damaged, or something that hasn't been taken care of in a restoration process, you're not only losing digital information, you're actually losing substantive information as well, because it's very hard for people, especially in modern audiences, to be able to relate to or be able to latch on to a film if it's not been properly restored, because all of the flaws and everything are enormously distracting, especially during today, where we have everything in super deluxe 4K high definition. And this way you're able to communicate the film effectively to people. Perhaps even if this kind of thing was shown today to the NAACP or any of the other powers that be that make these kind of decisions, then it would probably be much more praised than anything else. And it's a real artistic achievement as well, especially with the transitions between the animation and the live action. That's something that's very, very inspiring with that one. I believe that was done by Ken Anderson. One of the 9 old men. He was the one who was in charge of most of the animation, or was it Wilfred Jackson? Either one of those. Anyway, but the other thing that I want to say with anybody who's going to watch this for the first time, make sure to watch it at least two or three times. And the reason why I say that is because I did my own little miniature version, not necessarily in any way comparable to this, for a couple of my friends to view, and when you first watch it, you're watching it because it's controversial. Okay, you're watching it for the fact that it's controversial, and you're looking at it through that lens. Then the second version, the second time that you're watching it, it's really, like we're all like we all love Splash Mountain, so we're looking at it basically by the animation, and then it becomes slightly disappointing because it's not because the animation, although it's there, it's less than a third of the film. And then once you watch it the third time, you come in with the proper expectations for this film, and then you really see how amazing the live action portions really are, and how important this was to racial relations, and how its storyline is done. It's just very, very well done. But you do have to watch it more than once to be able to appreciate it.
Well, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for tuning in on the weekend here on That Park Place. What are your thoughts when something like this happens? Are there any other films that you would like to see restored to this level? Maybe something that you might Google, like say a 4K 77, 4K 80, or 4K 83. Not that I'm telling you what you need to go searching right now if you're interested in fan restorations of popular films that you might be interested in. All I can say to that is may the force be with you. Please come back here to That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com for all the news that should be fun. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.